So I understand that I'm coming up on the end of this series. And sure enough, a lot of people are expecting me to sort of put a feather in the hat. Get to the big reasons why I have problems with the alt-right, why I don't really associate myself with the alt-right, and why I think the alt-right is fundamentally going to result in a disaster for civilization and Western civilization unless it's deeply reformed and deeply reconceptualizes what it is and what its priorities are as a movement. And I think in these last two videos, I can really round out the series, make it clear what my real fears are for the future and my real hopes, and in many ways how the objectives of the alt-right run contrary to the hopes and only make my view towards an imperfect future more bleak. And I think we can start at least with the bad. The black pill, or to finish out our chess analogy, the black king. And here I bring forward one central problem, and that is that the alt-right really doesn't address the main problems that are facing humanity in the 21st century. It doesn't really confront the things that keep me up at night, that make me worried about the future for my children. And I know the alt-right is predominantly a movement based around fears about the future and fears about what the future will look like for coming generations. But nevertheless, even though I see some of their pessimism, and I see, and in some senses, sympathize with a lot of the problems they point out, I think they miss the main point. Let's take the alt-right's big boogeyman, the often mocked white genocide. Somewhat deservedly so for being hyperbolic, an exaggeration of what's actually going on, but it describes a real effect when you get down to the non-strawman version. This is the demographic reality that in most white countries, European or ethnically European peoples are not reproducing themselves, while an enormous amount of world population is coming from the Muslim world and sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, the net effect of these demographic realities are that in the future, there's a high probability that very few children will be born of European ethnicity. White people and European people will be a vanishingly small demographic on the world stage. And with it, their culture might disappear as well. And I understand why this is a pessimistic view of the future. I come from a Western and European culture. I don't want that culture to be destroyed demographically or otherwise. But I would be lying if I said that this was the only worry on my mind, or even the primary worry on my mind when I cast my foresight 50, 100 years into the future. Because I think that humanity itself is under threat, and I know that seems melodramatic, and what's going to happen is global warming going to kill humanity, is the artificial intelligence going to destroy humanity, but these more science fiction-y hyperbolic strawmen aside, I think there's an enormous amount to worry about. I mean, we are on the cusp of technological revolutions in virtual reality and artificial intelligence and genetic engineering that could essentially strip away all of the truly human decisions that we have to make, essentially making humans spectators in their own lives, if not absolute slaves to the people who ultimately sit at the reins of this technology. People are becoming more and more addicted to the consumer products of an economy that's itself becoming more and more liberated from its need for workers, innovators, and any of the other myriad jobs usually done by the middle class. As a result, people are increasingly just consumers, passively sitting by as more and more and more of the things that used to give their parents and grandparents meaning in life get stripped away, get reprocessed, and rebranded into something that can be consumed. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's what's already happened. As these technologies become more and more advanced, they will become more and more able to physically strip away our humanity, even beyond what we give up to indolence and gluttony. I feel like we are quite quickly entering the period of history that C.S. Lewis predicted in The Abolition of Man, where technology has become such a master of the form of the human that it's essentially able to re-engineer new generations and new minds for those generations to the extent that man is more a slave to his own technology than he is the master of it. And frankly, what's waiting at the end of that singularity is anybody's guess, be it some super corporation's bottom line human or some malevolent AI. At the end of the day, the history of free humanity may fundamentally be coming to an end. And that's the real battle. I mean, as much as I would like my ancestors to participate in a Western culture, to understand the beauty of Shakespeare, the sublimity of the Bible, and the poetry of Yeats, that sort of takes a back seat to my desire to have any humans in the future feel anything that doesn't directly contribute to a corporation's bottom line. And we can see this problem readily enough in the alt-right's favorite country, Japan. I mean, the otaku culture of shut-in adults who spend their entire lives wasting away watching anime and playing video games, only consuming, has become widely known in the West. It's a growing cultural phenomenon in Asia, and as much as we mock it here in Europe and North America, the same phenomenons are at work everywhere, and the existence of the ethnostate in Japan has done nothing to hold this negative consequence of culture back. I don't look at Japan and see the dynamic society of the Victorian era. I see a newly decadent society addicted to consumerism. Now, you may have detected a theme throughout all of these videos, and indeed, it is a fairly consistent critique that the alt-right's main issue with civilizational reconstruction is addressing the problems of nihilism and consumerism in modernity, an issue which they effectively sidestep due to their focus on race. As such, the movement strikes me as almost petty. We're all trying to figure out what to do with this state of overabundance, with this culture that cannot generate meaning for us. And the alt-right, in the meantime, seems to be content to grasp at the most superficial elements of the previous great civilization. I mean, don't get me wrong, humanity needs a great civilization in this time. But as I have put forward in my last video, I've never seen a civilization born out of an obsession with ethnic pedigree. I'm someone who believes very deeply that humanity is facing a turning point in the next 100 to 200 years. We are approaching a fork in the road with 3 distinct paths. Down one of them, as always, I think, lies oblivion. The possibility that the increase in technology we experience will cause our own ethnic strife and territorial conflicts to eventually end the world through our own actions. Failing that, the second path is the continuation of corporate modernity as it exists, a peaceful existence, a pacified humanity devoted to consumption and pleasure, indolent and passive, as tradition is forgotten, as family is lost, as connections slowly become attenuated and break with the real world and the real individuals that inhabit that world, an option where humanity elects to be comfortable pets in a digital petting zoo. Slaves or specimens to corporate AI, on and on into the future. And I think there is only one path, though, that can save humanity, where humanity agrees to progress and still preserve the essence of its own identity as a conflicted moral being who has obligations outside itself, where people form real and lasting connections with new family members who make real sacrifices, who have real obligations to their ancestors, and have real hopes and dreams for their descendants. And even in the bleakest time, I'd like to think that this third path is possible. And here I have to be brutally honest about the role I see the alt-right is playing. Now, I'm sure that many people on the alt-right would share my horror of the prospect of a humanity dominated by consumerism and modern nihilism, but I feel it does nothing to address these central issues. And while it does nothing to address my concerns about the second disaster scenario, its presence makes the possibility of a species-ending ethnic war all the more likely. And I know that's hyperbolic, I know that most wars hardly have impact on the species generally, but I also know it won't need to, because the mere threat of conflict will be used by people who would prefer a pacified humanity to justify their own actions. They want to present humanity with a false dichotomy, either Facebooktopia or unending ethnic conflict. And I hate to say it, but the alt-right only makes this effort easier for them. The alt-right is very fond of reminding people that individualism is petty, that all people are connected to the broader community, that they share problems in common. And we indeed share problems in common with our race, just as we share them in common with our family. But But has their focus on race really blinded them to the fact that there may be huge problems that we share as an entire species? That modernity and nihilism are issues that may have to be answered as an entire planet? I mean, as totally banal and contentless as loyalty to humanity is in most senses, every now and again there is an issue. There is a problem under which we all suffer. And in those circumstances, we need a voice that carries beyond race. And perhaps I'll speak more about that voice in the last video of this series.